Hey everybody, this is Doug Mark from Learning Zen, and I am here for 5 franchising questions with my guest, Cyle Adair. Cyle is the CEO and founder of Transcend Translations, based out of Salt Lake City, Utah, kind of in our backyard. Cyle, thanks for joining us. Appreciate having you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
Well, Cyle and I have been talking for a couple of weeks now, and he's got a really interesting background, and I really like what Translation Services does because as I'm thinking about what it's like to kind of bring a product or a brand into a non-English speaking region, I've realized there are a lot of gotchas that I had never thought about before. So I'm hoping that you can just kind of start out by telling our audience a little bit about Transcend, how you got started, and what services you provide.
Transcend Translation, we are a language translation and localization company. And also another term, so you're going to hear translation, localization, and interpretation. I'll kind of go on all of those. Translation is kind of what you expect. You got to translate it from English into Spanish, into German, Japanese, Chinese. You're going to translate that. Localization means you're going to localize it for a specific target market, meaning, hey, we're going to go to Argentina for that Spanish compared to Mexico for that Spanish. There are some slight differences there. So, and how you talk and things like that all make a difference. It's the same thing with here in the United States. You know, we're going to recognize UK English and go, oh, they added color. Why did they put a U in that? You know, and we're going to recognize some things and go, oh, this is UK. But there are some slight differences. And so you localize it to a specific area, which can be very important for some organizations and what they're trying to achieve. And then the last thing is interpretation. That's the spoken word. So maybe when you have meetings, maybe when, webinars that you have, trainings that you have that are all spoken and people need to listen to it in that language, that's interpretation. And so we help out with those side. I always kind of break it down. Interpretation is the spoken version. Translation is the written text.
And that was helpful for me because I'm always thinking about it from the translation side, but I forget about initial meetings where you're going to go south of the border and have a meeting with someone. That next level, comes into play, which is interpretation, I feel like. And so is that something that you guys, have people on staff that you provide for clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of 3 major ways that we typically provide that most clients need. There are some custom things that we do as well too, but there's what we call on-site interpretation. So maybe you have that interpreter come physically to that meeting so they can kind of do that, or a lunch or whatever you're doing specifically. So they're going to be there and going to be interpreting. That's called consecutive interpretation. You're speaking, you say 2 or 3 sentences, you give a little break, the interpreter interprets, and then that person comes back. The other way is via a Zoom meeting or a webinar, however you want to say it. In the Zoom meeting, it can be consecutive, but there can also be what we call simultaneous, which is more of the webinar. Hey, some guy's just giving a presentation, talking about it, training about it. He's not really looking for feedback right then. He's just going to be talking for 10, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, however long their presentation is. And that interpreter is in the background listening and then also interpreting at the same time, which is a very, very high level of not only the knowledge, but your brain needs to work in that way too, which is very, very hard to do. That's very common as well too. And then a lot of times we have our 24/7 call center that people can call in. So you have your 800 number, you have your access code. And so when you're going, hey, I need help to interpret this person, their English isn't as good as what it was in the emails that we were emailing back and forth with.
Right.
You can call our call center 24/7, get it connected with an interpreter. Usually it's a connection time of about 20 seconds or less. So it's pretty quick.
Wow.
Connected. And then now they'll be able to interpret that phone call as well too. So those are kind of like some of the main ways that people use interpretation.
So I know e-learning is a really obvious example where translation services comes in. And I think that's one we're all kind of aware of, right? Because we're like, oh, I've created a training video in English. Now we're going to go to Mexico. I need to get this into Spanish. And we're going to go up to Canada. I need to get, French in there as well. It's really common from the training perspective, but, where are other places that translation services come into play? Like, is this marketing? Is this kind of everything at the company? Can you expand upon that a bit?
Every franchise is going to be different in this way, but I'll just walk you through. Training is something that's really what I would say, specialize in, because it's one of the hardest things. Because not only are you going to do like translation, but you're also going to need like video and voiceover, and you're going to need to know the software of how they're building those training courses. Is it in Articulate? Is it in, Storyline? Is it in Lectora? There's a lot of different softwares out there, and that's what we really, really know. So translating a document is actually pretty easy. translating e-learning courses is absolutely next level that a lot of translation companies can't do. But going back to kind of your question, like where do they start or where's that go? Usually it's the initial thought, the idea, like how would our franchise have success in Mexico, in Germany, in wherever part of the world? Usually that first initial step is that, and trying to figure out like, could we do that? Well, let's do a little bit of marketing material. Let's maybe get the website so it's there and we can start seeing how much interest people would have. Like, are there going to be people reaching out? Are there going to be people applying? So getting that website translated or some marketing materials is usually the first step. And then you kind of realize like, oh, I think we got something here. I think we might have something. Now it's the step of, okay, we need to actually translate the franchise agreement, start getting there a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you can kind of get away with less stuff at the beginning, but that's kind of the next major phase is to do that. And then you start getting into, okay, this person fully on board and English, they're not going to understand it. Now we need to start getting to not only just franchise agreement, all the legal documents that come along with that as well too. So you're going to have to do that side as well too. And then now it's getting to the training. And even when you start with that marketing stuff, you're going to start to get some of the stuff that might overlap in a little bit of the training portion there. But finally, now you get to the training, and then there will just be that consistent, hey, we need to keep that up or update. When we update the English, we got to update it in the other language. Thankfully, just to not scare anybody, there's something that we leverage that's really important. It's called translation memory. Okay. So anybody looking to go global and they're like, oh my gosh, like it's stuff all the time, it's going to double our cost. It doesn't really do that actually, because once you translate it, great example, a franchise agreement. Once you do that initial translation, all that translation is saved in translation memory, which is a repository. It's a library. Every single sentence, basically, it's stored in there. And so when you go through an update and you have to update that franchise agreement, maybe you only change 2%, 1%, something like that. When you do that, that translation memory kicks in and plugs it all in, zero cost, zero extra time, anything like that. So it's a huge thing. So truly all you're paying for is that difference. And the cool thing is you don't have to go through and highlight like, wait, what changes did we make? Where is that at? Don't even worry about that, at least with our company. And hopefully there's lots of other companies that use it as well too. But so truly that cost is just going to be a minimal cost to update things.
That was phenomenal and something that I hadn't necessarily, thought about. It's funny, you actually answered the question that was next on my list. And I should point out that Kyle has no idea what questions I'm asking him. So first of all, impressive stuff. You also dropped some awesome, e-learning tools while you were, having that initial response about training. So good on you. I feel like the e-learning creators should be happy about the fact that Kyle totally knows his stuff. What's the first step for a franchise brand when they're considering moving into like a non-English speaking territory? And I know you had mentioned a lot of different things, and I just had one that triggered into my head, and I'm wondering if it comes into play, which is surveys. When we're talking about training and education, a lot of what we're doing is we are surveying the learners, and we're trying to understand what are their learning habits and their styles and things like that. So a lot of it starts with that upfront analysis. Does that hold true with translation services as well? Is surveying, if you're going to expand into a region that's non-English speaking, does a survey help?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'd say that's one way that we're different. Like we really want these organizations, we want these franchises to be successful. And that doesn't mean like translate everything into all languages, go.
Yeah.
It can be extremely rewarding. I'm always shocked when, organizations where they're like, we just realized like we could literally increase our sales by 15% by getting into Japan or getting into Mexico or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's the easiest, fastest way to grow an organization is to get to another language. There's going to be a little bit of an investment, but it's really not, it's not as bad as what I think most people think. When people are looking at that, they've got to be open that, hey, a survey, and that's kind of what you're talking about. Do that, baby step this in. Go, okay, when it's all said and done, we helped out an organization. They're out of Kansas City, actually. And they wanted to do exactly that. And when it was all said and done, they paid $500. $500. Now, hopefully that's not wrecking the bank for any organization.
Right.
But $500, they got their terms and conditions translated. They got a couple different landing pages that they wanted translated and a survey that they needed as well, too. They got all that done for $500. It gave them the data that they needed after was it probably 4 months or 5 months later, they're like, yeah, we should totally be doing this in Spanish. This is like a no-brainer. Then they made a little bit more of the investment, which is actually a lot less than what they thought it was going to be as well, too, to get so much of their stuff into Spanish. And it has drastically increased their overall revenue as well, too. So it can be very easy, but baby step into it. Don't feel like you have to go like, oh, this is going to cost us $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, we need a budget of $1 million to go do this stuff. That is not, in my sense of being a business owner myself, not a wise idea. Baby step, do a couple little tests, see where it goes. And a lot of times it'll work out. Sometimes it doesn't. So do that first before you jump all in to do it.
What is like the most common mistake people make when deciding to do a translation project, for example? Are they trying to do it on their own? Because that seems terrifying to me, but I'm curious what you think.
There's too many to say. Good example. I mean, we're based in Salt Lake City, Utah. I think a lot of people know, or maybe they're familiar, like the Mormon Church or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A lot of people that went on missions all across the world. And so they go, oh, that person. I mean, personally, myself, I did that. I went down to Argentina, was there for 2 years. That's how I picked up my Spanish. Just to let you know, I can't pass our translation test.
Really?
I'm fluent. I can talk to people all day long in Spanish. A fellow colleague of ours, Dave Hansen, we talked in Spanish plenty of times. I talked to all different Spanish people. In fact, just last night, I had a good friend over that's from Argentina. And we were talking in Spanish for a little bit. It doesn't mean that you're a translator. Thinking that someone is bilingual doesn't mean the same. And what I try to equate that to is one of my favorite authors growing up, Roald Dahl, if you remember him, or like J.K. Rowling's, that did Harry Potter. You can't compare. I can't go, oh, Douglas, you know how to write in English. Go ahead and write a phenomenal novel. Have it be perfect. Be like, I think J.K. Rowling's is going to kick my butt in that sense. Like that's not what I do. Yes, I can speak English, but that's not what I'm good at. And so some people make that mistake of thinking like, oh, let me have somebody that knows the language or took, you took Spanish in college. Like, can you just help us out with this stuff? And then they're shocked or not. Shocked/not shocked when the results come back and you're like, oh, and then if you have like a professional translation company look at it and they're like, yeah, this is kind of confusing, actually. I could understand why nobody's really interested in this. So there's that side of, hey, having somebody like a coworker or somebody that you're like, oh, that was your native language, like you're good to go to, and assuming that they're going to do a good job with translation. That's definitely a downfall. And then the other side is, well, there's multiple, but I've already touched on thinking that it's going to be like some massive cost, or try to get away with like not even a budget, trying to do everything at once rather than just going baby step into it, do small things and see where that goes.
We're both, business owners, and I think we have a lot of appreciation for other roles that we do sales and we do marketing and we do a lot of different things. I also, in kind of stalking your profile, noticed that you had some appreciation for, some marketing commercials and things like that are out there. And I'm just curious, is there a brand or a company out there that's doing really cool things, I feel like, from a marketing standpoint that like we should all follow or we should watch? Mine is Airbnb. I'll throw it out there. Like, okay. I think that the commercial that they did with, it's like a senior couple and they're dancing around the table and Jay-Z's Bonnie and Clyde is playing in the background. And it's like the cutest thing ever, seeing this older couple just like having a great time at this rental house together. And I think it's brilliant what they're doing. Do you have one out there that you love, a company that's doing cool marketing stuff? I
will say one of the things for me is actually Geico. And it's been several years since I feel like I've seen like a good commercial from Geico of like, I just like where they're like, we're here to just brighten your day a little bit, have some comedy, have some fun. Oh yeah, we do insurance, by the way. And that's kind of our take on it. Like, we're a very fast growing company. We're probably, in fact, received some recent news that it's not official yet, but it's looking like we are the fastest growing translation company in the world. Organically, we haven't purchased other companies and things like that and mergers. And so it's kind of a cool thing. But at the same time, I'm like, look, we're here, and if we're a good fit for people, that's awesome. And we want to provide maximum value that you're like, these guys make our lives so much easier. They're well worth the cost. In fact, the cost is pretty good compared to a lot of other translation companies. And so for me, I want to look at that and go, let's just have some fun. Let's enjoy life. Yeah, we do translations if you need help with that too. And I think you're just genuinely going to enjoy the people that you get to work with from our organization,
That's awesome. I mean, it's a lot like a lifestyle company, which is what we tried to build here at Learning Zen as well. Culture is everything to us. It's what we sort of exude when you have a conversation, is that you're not just getting a product, you're getting a relationship. And I think that's a big thing. And I think that's why I've enjoyed our connection so much, because that is a really authentic answer that I can appreciate. So kudos and congrats. What news, dude? That's amazing.